folks, today is Thursday, June 20th, 2019. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Vice President Joe Biden under attack for saying he worked well with segregationists early in his Senate career. Then demands an apology from Senator Cory Booker, who says, hell no, I ain't apologizing for nothing. We'll also talk about it, St. Louis, folks, in a stunning story. Black cop shot 2 years ago by a white cop who says he got virtually no support from the St. Louis Police Department. Wait till we break this thing down. And also, remember the story we did on the racist messages that are being posted on various Facebook pages? Well, in St. Louis and Philadelphia, nearly 100 cops have been pulled off of the streets as a result of those racist social media posts. Also, can North Carolina State Senator Erica Smith beat the incumbent Republican in North Carolina and turn it blue? We'll talk with her. Also, Pennsylvania, add them to another state, celebrating Juneteenth as a holiday. Also, two black bears in Dallas and Kansas City. We'll tell you who they are. It's time to bring the funk. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, Joe Biden stirred up a hornet's nest when he recently had a fundraiser in New York where he talked about working with segregationists, folks like James Eastland of Mississippi and Herman Talmadge of Georgia. He said he was making the point to argue that Washington functioned more smoothly and that even though he disagreed with them on a lot of issues, they still got things done. This was the quote he gave. I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland. He never called me boy. He always called me son. A guy like Herman Talmadge, one of the meanest guys I ever knew. You go down the list of all these guys. Well, guess what? At least there was some civility. We got things done. We didn't agree on much of anything. We got things done. We got it finished. But today, you look at the other side and you're the enemy, not the opposition, the enemy. We don't talk to each other anymore. Well, that did not sit well with lots of Democrats, including many of the folks who are running against Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination in 2020. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey was not happy at all. He said in a statement, quote, you don't joke about calling black men boys. Men like James O. Eastland use words like that and the racist policies that accompany them to perpetuate white supremacy and strip black Americans of our very humanity. Vice President Biden's relationships with proud segregationists are not the model for how we make America a safer and more inclusive place for black people and for everyone. I have to tell Vice President Biden, as someone I respect, that he is wrong for using his relationships with Eastland and Talmadge as examples of how to bring our country together. Now, Biden did not back down. This was his retort to what Booker had to say.
Are you going to apologize like Cory Booker has called for?
Apologize for what?
Cory Booker's called for it. He's
Cory
asking
should
you to
apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career. Period. Period. Period.
This is with Greg Carr, Chair, Department of Afro-American Studies, Howard University. Robert Patillo joins us via Skype. He's a civil rights attorney. And Johan LeBlanc, National Security and Foreign Affairs Analyst. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you. I read the comments from Biden, and I get the point he was making. I would argue, which I tweeted, I said, my suggestion, find some other Republicans who you've worked with if you want to make that point, because when you talk about these segregationists, you talk about what they did, their entire intent was to disenfranchise black people.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, young Joe Biden ran into Talmadge and Eastland near the end of their careers in the Senate. And I'm sure Vice President Biden should probably go back and reread Robert Cairo's trilogy on Lyndon Johnson, the master of the Senate. Johnson knew how to twist the arms of those segregationists, but Biden was up and coming. He was trying to make his way in a Senate that was really controlled in many ways by those Dixiecrats.
Johnson was a Southerner.
That's exactly right.
Biden was a Northerner.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Pennsylvania, working class Joe, as he said. And one of the things they could bond on was their whiteness. Now, you know, this is not even 10 years, just a little over, actually 11 years, after these cats signed on to this Southern Manifesto. They were staunch racists. But, you know, for me, I think this is probably Biden casting about for a sister soldier moment. In other words, he's trying to signal to these white folks in this quote-unquote base that they're always trying to capture that they can never get, I'm okay. I know how to work that side. Now, I think he stepped over the line when he tried to say something to Cory Booker, and that puts somebody like Simone Sanders in an impossible situation. You know, Simone is probably gonna have to massage that torch she made. But the last thing I'll say is I think you really raised it, Roland, when you evoked Fannie Lou Hamer on social media. When you hear Fannie Lou Hamer talk about James Eastland at that testimony she gave in 1964 at the Democratic National Convention, that means that Joe Biden should have had the courage in the late 60s. He can't say this is a different age. No, Fannie Lou Hamer stood up to him in the 60s. Why didn't you, young man?
Right. And the reality, Johanna, is what you're dealing with here is Joe Biden also has to deal with the issue of busing in the early 70s. And his comments that he made as well. And what he also has to understand that this is not, first of all, being President Obama's vice president for 8 years ain't kryptonite. You have a generation of black folks who held comments Hillary Clinton made in 92 against her, super predator. He needs to understand that you piss off 18 to 29-year-old black folks, look what happened to Hillary. They may not turn out for you.
Aside from the comment that Vice President Biden made today, I think that it's very troubling that Vice President Biden is not acknowledging racial issues in America and how the effects of that has really, like the racial issues have really impacted the way we live, the way we see the world, and our ability to access various institutions. Like, I want a potential president who's going to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and provide me with perhaps proposals on how we're going to make the future right. Right? There are a lot of issues in terms of segregation, in terms of various laws in America that have systematically oppressed people of color. I want a candidate who's going to speak on those things, right? Because especially right now, we're living in a time when we're at the crossing line, right? We have a president that we see time and time again have expressed that issues impacting people of color are not a priority, right? So I want Biden to be more on course in terms of providing us with possible solutions. This is not the first alarming comment that he has made. It seems to be a trend, and I'm not sure who his advisors are, but he needs to be a bit more well-advised when it comes to issues impacting
Here's
people
the deal,
of color.
though. You can't advise someone like Biden. Robert, the reality is he is who he is. But here's what Ron Brownstein tweeted out earlier, Robert. He says, re-upping, the Joe Biden campaign, here we go to my iPad. The Joe Biden campaign is testing whether today's Dems can accept the choices earlier party leaders made when Southern conservatives were vital to their House, Senate majorities and non-college whites. Many conservatives on culture/race equal 70% of all voters. Now, let me, and there was a quote he used in here, and I'm going to pull it up as well, where he said, quote, Dems first of all, he said, Joe Biden will now force Democrats to decide whether those earlier views are still acceptable in a party that has moved left since then on all racially related issues in response to both the shifting attitudes in the country and the increasing diversity of its voters. He also said Dems in almost every state, and certainly in presidential elections, relied on an electoral coalition centered primarily on whites without college degrees and secondarily on African Americans. In 1980, 60% of Carter's votes in his losing race versus Reagan came from working class whites. All we've heard in the past 2.5 years, 3 years of Donald Trump, Robert, is that you had those white voters who went for Donald Trump. You had, and I said this, 60 days out, I could pull the video up on MSNBC. I said, what you cannot count are white folks who've never voted for coming out of the woodworks and voting. Like it or not, and you have to deal with this, a Joe Biden is saying to white voters,
That's right.
I'm a better option than Trump. So now the calculus, Robert, people now have to make the determination. And first of all, I'm not handing the nomination to Joe Biden. But don't folks have to make a determination, do I roll with this or do I accept Trump 2.0?
Well, pardon me for disagreeing with everybody on the panel as I usually do. But I think there are 1,050 things to disagree and to criticize Joe Biden on. I don't think this is one of them. If you look at what he is saying, he is making the very particular point that the Tea Party Republicans now, that the Mitch McConnell Republicans now are harder to work with than Dixiecrats in the 1970s. That the people we have in office right now who blocked President Obama for 8 years are more recalcitrant in their political acumen than people like Talmadge, like people like Eastland, like people like Strom Thurmond were, who are at least willing to negotiate, who are at least willing to sit down and come to a good faith agreement. So if that's the litmus test that we're going to have for a Democratic candidate, whether or not they are completely pure on all subject matter, then it could be very difficult to build a coalition that wins outside of the traditional blue states.
No, Robert. If Biden had said just what you said, we wouldn't be here. See, that's the difference.
That's right.
Had Joe Biden said, let me tell y'all something. When I was a young man who came to the United States Senate, we had some of the most virulent racists from southern states. I had to work with folks like Jim Eastland of Mississippi, folks like Herman Talmadge of Georgia, folks who blocked every advancement for African Americans, you name it. And you know what? If I had to compare them to today's Republican Party, it was easier to work with them than to work with today's Republicans. That's not, and see, that's the difference, Robert. It's not necessarily what you say, it's also how you say it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Joe Biden does need to hire better communications people around him. He has that same issue that Trump had, where he just spouts off at the mouth as a 70-year-old white man and doesn't understand that the context is different now than it was in the 1970s or the 1980s when he was a younger person. So yes, he needs better communication people around him to tighten it out. Remember, he was always known as being a gaffe machine. But what I do not want Democrats to do is take this a bridge too far. Create a litmus test like they did for Al Franken, where you have to be completely pure in all ways, or else you cannot be the nominee. Because otherwise, you're going to have a candidate who can win California, New York, Illinois, and maybe one other state, and then the rest of the map is going to be red, and we're going to have 4 more years of Trump, and then 8 years of Pence, and then 8 more years of Ivanka after that. We have to learn that you cannot go for purity if you want to win. Obama wasn't pure when it comes to the liberal litmus test that exists now. We will never have that candidate if we want to actually win and regain national power.
Greg, I agree 100%. But again, though, what Biden has to understand is that he also has history. Here we go to my iPad. The book, Big Jim Eastland, the godfather of Mississippi.
Yes.
In this book, the author, J. Lee Annis Jr., writes about Eastland mentoring young United States senators like Joe Biden. Talks about how Biden wrote letters to them, thanking them for their work on the anti-busing bill. And so that's a part of this. But again, had he articulated the way Robert did, we're not here. But when he doesn't, he said we didn't agree on a lot. No. That's not how you frame 2 of the most violent, racist senators ever.
No, I think Robert, we know that they watch this broadcast. Robert gave Biden his talking point, if he had said it that way. But something has changed between the late 60s and now. as you said, I agree with Johanna. The demographics have shifted. This isn't the same country. Between then and now, you had Bill Clinton, who, as I said, attacked Sister Souljah as a wink and a nod to those quote-unquote working-class whites that were bleeding from the Democratic Party. And since then, and you bring this up all the time, as the demographics have shifted, you got Cory Booker from a generation that said, we're not going to play that. And for me, with the bad messaging notwithstanding, and I agree, that's why I said Simone Sanders, his director of communication, young African-American woman, maybe some of this is generational. If she had heard that, maybe, and nobody can tell him what to do, but at least talk to him that way. But what I was about to say is that you have the chastising of Cory Booker. That's not just tone deaf. That is the character issue.
And that's the piece, Johanna. Again, listening. You, in an issue like this here, you don't tell no black man who also is a United States Senator. He needs to apologize to me. First of all, Booker didn't call him a racist. Booker simply blasted the comments. And that's one of those where if you're Joe Biden, you want to say, what the hell is wrong with Senator Cory Booker? He knows better than me. The way you answer that is, I respectfully disagree with Senator Booker. I'm telling you, Biden needs to understand, he can cloak himself in 8 years of Obama. That ain't gonna save him. No. He cannot make mistakes like this again. Go ahead.
I don't want to be presumptuous, and I don't want to put words in Vice President Biden's mouth, but I think it's a matter of it's a generational thing, in my opinion, because we have. Yes, I'm concerned about some of the comments that he has made. I'm very concerned, but I think that with the right people around him, he will do the right thing. That I'm confident.
No,
about, right?
Okay,
we can't
no.
be so caught up
we also said
nuances.
If Trump get the right folks around him, he's 73. Biden 76. I mean, no. We have to stop with that. You are who you are. A 76-year-old man has to learn to say, hold up, I can't roll the way I used to. No. And to Greg's point about tone, see, here's the deal. I was on the panel at Martha's Vineyard. Charles Ogletree had this panel, and this was 2008. And Obama won the nomination. All these white folks are all up in arms, especially these white women who supported Hillary. And we're on the panel, and David Gergen was on the panel with me, and he goes, Obama, you look at the numbers, has no choice but to pick Hillary Clinton as vice president. And I said, well, the hell he don't. And then I said, it's offensive that a black man can't even enjoy getting a nomination when the next day Bob Johnson put a letter out talking about how he needs to pick Hillary Clinton. And so I was sitting here jamming it up. Alan Dershowitz took issue with my tone. I said, who the hell you think you talking to? I said, man, here's my point. What white folks got to understand is that what Biden was really, it's a tone thing. And see, it's hard for white people to understand when you are proud. Why did Cornel West and Obama go at it? Because the real deal was Obama cussed them out at the National Urban League.
No question.
It's a tone thing. Biden has to watch his tone. Okay. And if you don't watch your tone, you're going to piss a lot of black folks off, because for a lot of black folks who are 50 and under, we ain't accepting certain tones.
Here's my position. Here's my position, Roland. I get it, but we cannot be caught up in these little nuances, right? We need to focus on the big picture.
No.
Big picture
Needs to focus. See, no. But Johanna, I hear you.
I really.
But he has to understand, bruh, you leading in the polls. You have to watch your tone.
Okay.
Because you're gonna get checked. Robert, go ahead.
Let's not take the politics out of this. We have to understand Cory Booker is currently trailing Joe Biden by 33 points in the latest polls, 35% to 3%. Right now, Joe Biden in South Carolina has 50% of the black vote, and if Cory Booker can't make a showing in South Carolina, he has no reason to be in the race. So understand the politics around it. Cory Booker isn't just doing this, with an empty heart, or he is not doing this for no reason. He is trying to make a case for him to rise in the polls, to make some kind of headway against the other candidates who are left in the dust.
I understand.
And we can't leave that out of it.
But Johanna, this is the final comment before I go to my next story. The reality on stories like this is you have to look at 2016. You had a generation of black voters who held super predators against Hillary Clinton. They held it against her and never let go. I'm just saying, and they did not vote.
And I understand, as people, we have to look at our priorities, right? Was that the best move? Let's look at in the context of what's happening
I would
today.
say it wasn't,
right?
but they did it anyway.
Right. So as a people, we have to readdress our values. Like, what do we value? Are we going to focus on every little nuance, things that don't really matter? When in fact, I think if you have a person like Biden in office, I think that with the right people around him, he'll do the right thing. I mean, he hired Miss Simone as his PR.
But here's the point.
And I think
here's the final point of this here. And I totally agree with you. I understand practicality. I understand common sense. But the onus is also on the candidate.
Absolutely.
To understand that I better watch my tone.
Exactly.
I better watch how I say it, because now what he's done is he's now had to deal with this for 48 hours. And it's called an unforced error.
And it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
No, actually, it's not a good thing.
It's a good
but
thing.
It's a good thing it's happening in June and not in October.
That's a good
That's
point.
what's a good thing.
It's a good thing to address the issues, like, at the very beginning, to let you know that, to call things out as they are.
What I'm saying
because
is,
I think that a lot of times we don't do that. I think it's a good thing. It's a good approach.
Unforced error. You shouldn't have to be dealing with it, and so it was a mistake.
But there's
all
a
I'm saying is,
gap as well, so.
Vice President Biden is real simple. Use Arlen Specter. Use some other Republicans you work for. Don't use segregation is all I'm saying. Let's talk about St. Louis, folks, where a black police officer is speaking out about racial division in the police department. Officer Milton Green, folks, was shot by one of his co-workers 2 years ago. Green is black, and the person who shot him is white. Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole says it was friendly fire, but Green says it was racism and is filing a suit against the St. Louis Police Department. Now, folks, let me explain to you exactly what happened here. A guy had an accident. He was sitting here, then they were chasing him. Green hears it, grabs his gun badge. He yells, "I'm a cop." Cop tells him, "Put your gun down." Another cop comes along, while saying "put your gun down," shoots Green. He has since been on disability, has been unable to use his right arm. The white union raised money for the cop who shot him. Green says he has not gotten the kind of support he needs from the police department, and he says it's dead wrong. Now, the chief, of course, has disagreed with that. The question is, what happens now? Joining us now is Milton Green's attorney, Javad Kazeli, and Reddit Hudson, founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability. First of all, I want to go to you, Javad. When you look at this story here, I mean, again, I've heard from many other black cops who said, man, the worst position I want to be in is when I'm not on duty or I'm not in uniform.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is one of the most egregious cases I've ever seen. It's actually a little bit worse than the way that you described. Officer Green saw these two suspects. One of them pointed a gun at Officer Green. He pulled out his weapon that he's supposed to have on him all the time, pointed it at the guy. The guy ran away. All of a sudden, he's surrounded by other police officers. They tell him to get on the ground. He gets on the ground, puts his gun down, identifies himself as a police officer. The detective on the scene recognizes him, tells him to stand up. He stands up, calmly is talking to the detective with his badge in his hand. And mind you, this is Missouri. One of the most lax gun laws. You can have a gun, but he has his badge in his hand. All of a sudden, another cop shows up late and just looks at Milton, immediately yells, "Put down your gun," and shoots him, hitting him in his arm, ending his career. Now we're 2 years after this has happened, and Milton's disability payments haven't even been adjudicated yet. His house is in foreclosure. You know, he's basically losing everything because the city is not supporting him.
And what's crazy here is, again, a police department not owning up to it. The cop who shot him, any charges filed against him?
No charges filed against him. We did learn this week when we filed the lawsuit and we served it on the police department. They came back and they rejected the lawsuit because they've told us that he no longer works for the police department. We've been told that has nothing to do with Officer Green's case, that he's just not there anymore.
Wow. Ridley Hudson, again, we hear this from a lot of black police officers who say they are scared to death when they have to be on the other end of the barrel of a gun by another cop.
Man, Roland, you have black officers who are scared to be on duty now with some of their fellow officers. As I think you referenced earlier on social media, one of my colleagues who's a police officer with St. Louis City right now, Detective Heather Taylor, is the president of the Ethical Society of Police Officers, which is a predominantly black police officers association, one of the better black municipal police officers associations in the country. You have officers online posting things like they hope she bleeds to death because she's consistently called for accountability among police officers on that department. And the fact that that officer is no longer with the department, I guarantee you he left voluntarily. He wasn't forced out. One of the points of emphasis in a case like this that I would like to make, especially for officers around the country, is this union. The St. Louis Police Officers Association is a union of police officers that did not back Milton Green in this situation. They did back the guy who shot him in this situation. There was another officer, black officer, Luther Hall, who was beaten unmercifully by 4 white officers here in St. Louis City at a protest during the Jason Stockley verdict. If you remember that, there were protests following the not guilty verdict for Jason Stockley, who was the officer who announced the murder of a black man and then carried it out, almost execution style. Beat Luther Hall within an inch of his life. That police officers union offered him no support. So to those officers around the country, black officers who belong to these unions, man, stop giving your money to these unions that will do nothing for you and won't represent your interests or your community's interests at any time and will always stand against you. Witness the union in Cleveland now that fought for the officer that killed Tamir Rice to get his job back.
Javad, your client, Milton Green, still can't use his right arm?
He cannot. He can't hold a gun. I mean, he can use his hand, but when he shows it, he can't fully squeeze. He actually has to do workouts with a soup can right now. He can't properly hold a gun and fire it. He would be a liability to himself if he were on the streets. He hasn't been back to work since the incident occurred, and tomorrow will be the 2-year anniversary of that. And to talk about the Stockley cases, we actually represent about 16 people that were beaten the same night that Officer Hall was beaten. And the police department's position seems to be, did I lose?
No, you're there. Go ahead.
Okay, good. The police's position seems to be that the 120 people that they beat and pepper sprayed that night, that was lawful. But randomly, the only person that they made a mistake on was the one undercover police officer who happened to be black. The night that Milton was shot, he came in, he was rushed with a officer down call, was rushed to the hospital. The acting police chief and the person who's the current police chief both met with Milton. He told them what happened. He said everything was calm. You know, the perps were gone. And then this guy shot me. About a half hour later, the acting police chief goes out and gives a press conference and states that Milton was shot in a crossfire. An absolute lie. That white police chief is now suing St. Louis, claiming racial discrimination because he wasn't promoted to the full-time position.
Wow.
Roland,
Go ahead, Reddit.
None of this should be disconnected from the recent exposure that officers all over the country, including officers in Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Phoenix, got for their social media posts identifying themselves as either affiliated or sympathizers with white supremacist organizations that hold white supremacist and racist views. There are any number of officers on our streets as we speak that police according to those ideologies, and it's reflected in the way that they treat us. And we've seen it time and time again. Now's the time to hold officers accountable. It's not time for sensitivity training, none of that.
punishment is the order of the day. If you want to change police culture, you have to start holding people accountable.
And what you're speaking about, of course, we had the Plainview Project, a database produced by Philadelphia attorney Emily Baker White. We had her on the show. And what you're talking about is more than a dozen police officers under investigation in St. Louis for a series of racist social media posts, some of them around the time Green was shot. In addition to that, you also have 72 cops pulled off of the streets in Philadelphia and placed on administrative duty as a result. And I'm sorry, in St. Louis, 22 cops have been barred from bringing their cases to the circuit attorney's office. Last question for both of you, Javad. The point that we keep making, we keep hearing, oh, you know, it's a few bad apples. But what we're seeing fundamentally is we have fundamental issues in police departments, unions that protect them, and politicians are afraid to go against these police unions.
So I was a federal prosecutor back in a former life, and I wasn't even born in America. And I really love American idioms. And every time I hear that idiom, it's a few bad apples, I always ask people, what's the next part of that phrase? And that's the bad apples spoil the bunch. When other officers watch this, allow this to happen, and then come out and say that the people who do bad things are actually the heroes, that makes a lot of people question them. Milton has talked publicly that other officers went online and criticized him for what he did. They said that he was being a fool. He deserved what he got. You know, why is he asking for handouts? He says that his kids who were raised in a house with a police officer, now when they see other officers, they generationally are now afraid of these officers. Until we have real systematic changes with the way that the St. Louis Police Department polices, you can't expect the citizens to trust them. And the real irony is that was Milton's job. He was a community resources officer. It was his job to mend bridges between the police department and the community. And now he's seen what the police department has done and how they've abandoned him.
Reddit?
Black officers, wake up, man. A police officer will shoot you, disable you, and then have his colleagues question why you're looking for handouts. What we need now is leadership. We have that opportunity here in St. Louis. We have a black chief of police. We have a black public safety director. We need them to stand in the cut, man, and make a stand against these kinds of systemic abuses that reflect the racism that's at the foundation of police culture, not just here in St. Louis, but all over the country. And until we get that and hold some of these people accountable, we're going to see what we see. But I always say, as you know, Roland, I think it starts from inside. We need a critical mass of us inside the system ready to address these issues head on.
Absolutely. Javad Kazelli, Milton Green's attorney. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Reddit Hudson, thanks for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, going to a break. We come back. We're going to talk to the woman who is running for United States Senate in North Carolina. We'll also chat with Lee Saunders, of course, who leads AFSCME, talking about the resurgence of unions in America. All of that next on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. All right, folks, they're back. MarijuanaStock.org is another great investment opportunity. If you were lucky enough to invest in their last crowdfunding campaign, you know they raised a ton of money in just a few months investing in legal marijuana farms. Those initial investors now own shares of a publicly traded company, and they are on fire. Now they have a new investment opportunity that is as good, if not even better, than the last one. I'm talking about industrial hemp CBD. For those who don't know, the hemp plant is the cousin to marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD, which means hemp CBD gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the U.S. and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, the 2018 Farm Bill changed all of that, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. They need land to grow, all the plans. Now, this makes for an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. You can invest in the crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200 up to $10,000. Like I said, you don't want to miss out on this. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. And yes, this is a black-owned company, so you want to try it and get in the game. All right, folks, Democrats are hoping to take back the United States Senate next year. Republicans, of course, control the U.S. Senate, which means that they control the federal judges that go on the bench. Now, it was a tough row for Democrats in 2018, but Republicans have to now defend a number of seats, and one of those is the seat of Tom Tillis in North Carolina. Well, State Senator Erica Smith, she says she wants to be the person who can take that seat back, and she joins us right now. First and foremost, glad to have you here.
Glad to be here, Roland.
All right, so when we talk about this campaign here, we talk about facing Senator Tillis. One of the things that jumps out, we've had Reverend William Barber on before.
Yes.
He opposed, under President Barack Obama, 2 black women who could have been on the federal bench. They blocked those 2 sisters. One of them, who was the first black justice on the state Supreme Court. What are you saying to black voters in North Carolina why Tillis needs to be sent packing?
Well, number one, Tillis needs to be sent packing because he's merely a political puppet for the POTUS in the White House. And the sad reality is that Tillis is a flip-flopper. He can't make up his mind. Time and time again, as we saw today with the vote on the arms deal to Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, Tillis voted with the president to declare an emergency and also put all billions of dollars into funding for Saudi Arabia. And so what he is doing is supporting giving immunity to a country who killed one of our top reporters, Jamal Khashoggi. It's just ridiculous. The reason why we need to send someone like me, Erica Smith, to the United States Senate is because I'm the one who places people over partisanship and political games.
Now, of course, we know in North Carolina you dealt with voter suppression and an absolutely crazy North Carolina legislature because Republicans have really lost their mind there, doing all they can to block black voters. And so how do you, though, get over the hump making the argument that the state is better served in your hands versus in the hands of Tom Tillis?
Absolutely. Well, first, I'm glad you brought that up because, Roland, what the Supreme Court ruled is that the partisan gerrymandering and the racial gerrymandering was the worst seen. The voter suppression was the worst seen since Jim Crow segregation. And so when you look at Tom Tillis and his leadership, he started out in the House, and he was the Speaker of the House when they led an assault on education, public education. Now, I'm a former engineer, but now I'm an educator, and I know firsthand the damage that Tom Tillis did to our state and to the future security of our state. When we get down to the dynamics of who we need to send to represent us, we need to send someone with integrity, with character, who is about results and not rhetoric. And that's what you get with me, and that's not what we're getting with Tom Tillis.
You got to raise a ton of money, obviously, to campaign statewide. What are you projecting that you're going to need to beat Tillis?
Well, to beat Tillis, last time when Tillis ran against former Senator Kay Hagan, it was the most expensive race, not only in the state, but in the nation. And it was upwards of $40 million. So I know off the bat to raise $28 million. And the good thing is that based on the Emerson poll that was released last week, I'm already beating Tom Tillis by 7 points. Never in the history of our nation have we had an African-American woman challenge an incumbent and beating the incumbent in early polls. And that's the momentum that people see. We have a great opportunity right now. And when you have a candidate that is that strong out of the gate, who has a demonstrated record of service to her local community, the statewide community, because I'm a 3-term North Carolina senator, you have a competent candidate who is the one to send, and so the money needs to back that.
Ground game is also critically important. You got to have lots of people on the ground. How are you building that? Are you focusing on HBCUs? North Carolina has more HBCUs than any other state in the country.
I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, where dreamers become achievers from astronauts to presidents. Thank you, Roland, for coming down to North Carolina 2 years ago. You recall we worked on the HBCU bill that was set to change the names of the universities and to take away our historical history. I have a great outreach with millennials because as a strong education advocate, I already do a lot of work with HBCUs, and not only the HBCUs, but also our PWIs. And so we are definitely building a great ground game, field plan, a get out the vote plan. This is not our first time. We are experienced and we know how to handle this. People all across the state are reaching out, in fact, in the country, to support us and push us. And there's nothing like that HBCU love.
Last question. Are you getting the proper support from the Democratic infrastructure?
At this moment in time, I would say no. I'd have to be honest with you. We always have to work harder, shine brighter, be stronger, do twice the work to get half the credit. And I'm used to that, you know, from being a mechanical engineer.
So you've already had the primaries, right?
No,
Okay.
the primaries are March 3rd,
Got
2020.
it. And how many? So March 3rd, 2020. How many folks are you going to be? How many folks right now already announced their running?
Right now in the running, there are 4 candidates.
Got it.
And so incidentally, 2 candidates filed on Monday. After seeing the results, you have an African-American woman. And so I will admit, we may not be the establishment candidate, but it's time for us to do things a new day in a new way. And so the establishment needs to come in line. If you want someone to win who can energize your base and bring out a new type of voter, then that person's me.
All right. Senator Erica Smith, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, when we come back, we'll talk with Lee Saunders, AFS CME, talking about the increase of union workers, and we'll chat about some other stuff as well. Next, on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay woke.
This is Director X, the director of Superfly on the red carpet or the black carpet, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm Lex Scott Davis, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
All right, folks, our HBCU Giving Day School, Harris Stowe State University, founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1857. Notable graduates include Julius Hunter, Judge John Francis Nangle, Hazel Irby, Bobby Wilkes, Judge Charles Alexander Shaw. If you want to support Harris Stowe, go to hssu.edu, hssu.edu. All right, folks, this week, Nevada governor signed a historic union law to help 20,000 state workers. Unions are enjoying their highest level of public support in 15 years, and presidential candidates have embraced unions at a level not seen in a long time. Joining us right now is Lee Saunders. He is president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, and also, of course, a supporter of Roland Martin Unfiltered. And we always got to thank Lee and ask me for support. I think we're the first ones out of the gate. Lee, because of y'all's support, you know, we've been averaging about 8 million views since we launched. We've gone from about 170,000 folks on YouTube down to about 316,000. And so we've certainly been growing over the last 9.5 months.
I knew you'd be successful one day.
Well, you know, I told you we were going to do it. We did it.
You did it.
So just stay in the building.
Congratulations, man.
Stay in the building. Appreciate it. Let's talk about this here, because what is interesting that, again, what we've seen, and I'll go back to really Ronald Reagan. You go from Ronald Reagan up to present day. You had this constant, steady assault on unions. The whole idea of right-to-work states, folks creating the climate where literally if you said unions other than police and fire, it was a negative connotation. And you're seeing in these places where politicians are now being pressured by folks who say, no, we want folks fighting on our behalf when it comes to wages.
There's no question about it. As a matter of fact, the most latest polls show that 62% of the American public believe that we need strong unions in this country to be the counterbalance to the corporate greed that exists and the fact that workers need a seat at the table. That was instrumental in what we were able to do in the state of Nevada, where we were successful in electing a state legislature, both on the House and Senate side, who believed in supporting working families, who believed that unions made a difference for workers. We were able to elect a new governor, Steve Sisolak, who believed the same thing, and he gave us a commitment that if, in fact, they were elected, then they were going to push for collective bargaining within that state for state workers. And that's exactly what happened. I was in Nevada last week and was with the governor when he signed into law collective bargaining for state workers, covering 20,000 state workers who AFSCME is representing. And the key to this, Roland, is simply this. Those who support us, those who talk about the importance of helping working families in the communities in which they live, then we ought to support them. And the end matter is this: elections matter. Elections matter, and it mattered in Nevada, and we're seeing the results out of that right now.
Do you also think you're seeing that because you had so much attention on the wage gap? When I think back again, I'm going back to 1980, and I'm going through the 90s and 2000s. What we constantly heard from politicians was, look, support big business. They're coming in, supplying jobs. We can't have anything that's stopping that from happening. And voters said, oh, that's great, that's great. And all of a sudden, they woke up 30 years later and go, wait a minute, what the hell happened? We gave massive tax breaks. We gave infrastructure breaks. We did all these things. And then what happened? They got a massive tax cut under Donald Trump. And it's like, oh, we're going to reinvest it in the workers. And the CEOs went, no, we're not. And they haven't done it.
Trickle down does not work. It never has worked. Workers need to have a seat at the table to control their own destiny. And that's what unions provide them, a seat at the table so they can negotiate wages and working conditions, benefits, safety and health issues, not only just for themselves, but for their communities, because when workers are organized and you have a strong and healthy workforce who has a seat at the table, that benefits everyone who lives in that community where those workers reside. And that's why you're getting this kind of feeling across the country and an aggressive action that is taking place. You look at the strikes that have been taking place across the country. United Fruit and Commercial Workers striking up in the New England states. You look at Unite Here, Unite representing hotel workers, striking the Marriott Corporation and their slogan was, one job should be enough. The economy right now is rigged in favor of the 0.5% who want more power and wealth at the expense of working people. And unions are the avenue by which you can unrig that system. And that's why people believe that unions have a very strong and important place in today's society.
One of the things that also jumps out, again, as you begin to look at what is happening, how do you counter what took place in Ohio? Donald Trump campaigns talking about get rid of NAFTA. Yet in Ohio, he won by 450,000 votes. Have you and your union comrades been meeting to figure out what kind of messaging you're going to have to send when you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan to say to those folks who voted for Obama, but then who flipped for Donald Trump, who might be disillusioned now?
It's about getting back to basics. And it's about talking about the issues that workers care about. It's about talking about health care. It's about talking about retirement security. It's about talking about prescription drugs and the price of prescription drugs. Fairness on the job. If you deal with those kinds of issues and take the personalities away from it, but deal with the issues that the workers feel every single day, then you can sit down, talk with them, and more importantly, listen to what they've got to say and then react and develop programs around their economic concerns and impact on them, their families, and their communities. That's why we were successful in many states across the country in November of 2016, because folks listened to workers and what they had to say. It's real basic. This is not rocket science. Sit down and talk with folks, listen to what they've got to say, and then implement programs that will benefit them.
All right. Lee Saunders, President, AFSCME. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Great being here.
All right, folks, going to go to a break. When we come back, a shocking story out of Chicago where a black woman shopping in a Walgreens shot and killed by the friend of the manager. He went several days without even getting arrested. What the hell, Mayor Lightfoot? That's next. Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Essence Atkins, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, yo, Peace World, what's going on? It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, my name is Brisha Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. And, well, I like a nice filter usually, but we can be unfiltered.
What's going on? This is Tobias Trevelyan. If you're ready, you are listening to and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up? I'm Lance Gross, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, could it be any other way? Really? It's Roland Martin.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. All right, Robert, Johanna, and Greg, a stunning story in Chicago. Circe Bernardo was shot inside a Walgreens, and the company could be facing legal trouble. The night manager suspected Bernardo was shoplifting and called a friend, a former security guard. Witnesses said the man confronted Bernardo, falsely identified himself as a Chicago police officer. An argument turned physical, and the man shot Bernardo in the face. The man suspected of shooting her only turned himself into the police yesterday. He was also arrested last summer, accused of threatening a woman and once again claiming to be a cop. Robert, this is what's unbelievable here. He was the friend of the manager. You suspected a woman of shoplifting? She's now dead because you called a friend? No, you call the damn cops. If you think that, and so now you suspect, not even prove it, and she's dead. And he wasn't arrested for several days.
Well, let's understand the Chicago Police Department is very busy trying to track down the criminal mastermind Jussie Smollett and the Nigerian brothers who the parent the police department has been concentrating on. Ron, what you have to understand is this is part of the dehumanization of African Americans in this country, that you are reduced down to nothing more than a criminal. They can shoot you down like a dog because they think of you as no more. And that thought pattern doesn't just go along
are human. You got to stop doing what you've always done. These police are paddle rollers. When you see Officer Green get shot, your uniform didn't help you. You black, so I can shoot you and get away with it. When we see these people posting on social media all this racist stuff to get them suspended, they're going to go back on the force. And in this case, it's very simple. I have one question, because you raised the issue of the mayor. What's Walgreens' point? You know, Walgreens is a big employer, and they got a lot of weight in Chicago.
Of course.
Are they the ones trying to stall this out in part so that, you know, they don't get hung on the line for liability? But at the end of the day, it does come back to what you said, John, and Robert kind of led out with this, and you said it as well. Our lives matter to us, but they don't seem to matter in this country. So the solution to this, it seems to me, has to be, we have to get to the point where we value our lives more than we value the institutions that don't value our lives. That means you got to vote, you got to organize, you got to do what you need to do, and stop giving.
North Miami police officer was found not guilty of attempted manslaughter for shooting at a severely autistic man and wounding the man's caretaker, an unarmed behavioral therapist, in 2016. And the police department said it plans to fire the officer and has immediately put him on administrative leave without pay. We'll see. Also, Pennsylvania, folks, yesterday, the governor there, Tom Wolf, made Juneteenth a state holiday. He said, quote, "On this day, let us recognize the importance of continuing to build a nation that truly reflects the self-evident truth that all people are created equal." Also, I want to talk about a couple other stories. We got a couple of new black mayors. Eric Johnson officially became the mayor of Dallas on Monday. And, of course, he was criticized for his response to Dallas's violent crime rate. Now, the city has seen more murders during the month leading up to the runoff in May than in any single month since the 1990s. I don't know how he got criticized because he wasn't even mayor yet. Okay, that makes no sense. And in Kansas City, Councilman Quentin Lucas was elected as mayor. He said during the campaign that he would bring an outsider mentality to the mayor's office, reduce crime, increase affordable housing, and steer development projects to underserved areas. So certainly congratulations to those two black mayors. I'm gonna pull this up, y'all. I gotta deal with this here because Robert, did you see or hear the prayer that Paula White gave at the Trump rally the other day?
I did indeed.
Okay, so for the folks out there, I'm going to play this for y'all. And also, just so y'all know, I did, because you know, I remember last time Paula White did some stuff, I hit her up, I emailed her, she responded, she was taken out of context. And I said, well, you need to come on to the show. She never did. I texted her this time and also emailed her. She has not responded. But for the folks at home, and let me give the background for a lot of people out there. We're talking about Paula White, who is literally pastoring a black church in Orlando. The Paula White who took over for the previous pastor who passed away. This is the same Paula White who got her credibility off preaching to black folks, preaching on BET. And so this was her, y'all, the other night at the Trump rally. Henry, go to my iPad.
Good evening. Are you ready for a great night of victory? I'm going to ask you to do something. As our president often says, and I've had the wonderful privilege of having an 18-year relationship with him and his family, he says, we worship God, not government. So we're going to start out. I'm going to ask you to grab that person's hand next to you, if you don't mind standing up all over this beautiful arena, and just grab that sweaty hand that you've been holding. I believe in the power of unity. And as we begin to make declarations and come to the Father in prayer, Father, I come to you in the name of Jesus. And first and foremost, I give you thanks for our great United States. I give you thanks for our president and for your blessings and your goodness. Your word declares in Psalm chapter 34, verse 1, that I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. So we thank you and we bless you, God, for your goodness, for your grace, for your mercy. I pray for the Spirit of the Lord to rest upon our president. And let your favor cause his horn, his power, to be exalted according to Psalm chapter 89, verse 17. Lord, your word says in Psalm chapter 2, verse 1 through 4, why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Father, you have raised President Trump up for such a time as this. You are a God that reveals secrets. So reveal the secret and the deep things to President Trump, according to Daniel chapter 2, verse 22. Make known unto him the mystery of your will. I declare that skillful and godly wisdom have entered into the heart of our president, and knowledge is pleasant to him. Father, we ask you to compass him with men and women and make their heart and ears attentive to godly counsel, to do that which is right in your sight. Now, I need you to really go with me here. Let every evil veil of deception of the enemy be removed from people's eyes in the name which is above every name, the name of Jesus Christ. For you said in your word, so I'm going to deal with some principalities now, okay? Because you said in your word in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So right now, let every demonic network that has aligned itself against the purpose, against the calling of President Trump, let it be broken, let it be torn down in the name of Jesus. Let the counsel of the wicked be spoiled right now. According to Job chapter 12, verse 17, I declare that President Trump will overcome every strategy from hell and every strategy of the enemy, every strategy, and he will fulfill his calling and his destiny. Destroy and divide their tongues, O Lord, according to Psalm chapter 55, verse 9. Give President Trump strength to bring forth his destiny, according to Isaiah chapter 66, verse 9. Let the secret counsel of wickedness be turned to foolishness right now in Jesus' name. And I declare that no weapon formed against him, his family, his calling, his purpose, this counsel will be able to be formed. Now I declare that you will surround him and protect him from all destruction. Let the angel of the Lord encamp around about him, around his